Acknowledge that we are on the lands of Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional land of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we as beneficiaries of the treaty must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, we do not have a supplementary agenda this evening. Rules of decorum at a council meeting. The municipality of Chatham-Kent supports open meetings that welcome debate of public policy issues in an atmosphere of inclusiveness, integrity, civility, fairness, and respect for differing points of view. Anyone conducting themselves in a way that disturbs, disrupts, or impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting, interrupts or makes derogatory statement or hate speech, defamatory comments about councillors, staff, speakers, or fellow members of the public, may result in removal from the premises. This also applies to deputations. We ask that you do not approach members of council if they are seated in their council seats, and the public, unless invited, is not permitted to come in the gated horseshoe area. The use of posters, signage, and literature is also prohibited. Just to let everyone know for attendance, we have virtually participating this evening Councillor McGrail, Councillor Finn, and Councillor Story. There are no disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening. And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce our artist feature today, being St. Patrick's Day. We have a performance by the Cornell School of Irish Dance, and I'd like to welcome to the center of the room now.
Thank you so much. What a great way to start our meeting on St. Patrick's Day. This is part of us as a municipality celebrating all the amazing and talented individuals we have in our community, and for both visual and performing arts. So I want to thank you for taking time to come out and share your amazing talent with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll now move on to Planning Services, and we'll call upon Anthony.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So the process to be followed for each application will be as follows. One, the clerk will announce each individual planning item. Two, the mayor will ask if there's anyone present other than the applicant with an interest in the application and to indicate so by raising their hand. Three, the clerk will advise if any submissions have been received. Four, if someone present other than the applicant indicates an interest in the item, there will be a presentation by administration. Five, individuals with an interest in the application other than the applicant will be asked to proceed to the podium, provide their name, address, and address council. Six, the applicant will be asked if they wish to proceed to the podium to address council. 7, administration will be asked if they have any comments based on any discussion that may have occurred, and 8, council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regards to each item. Notice, if any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of proposed applications does not make oral or written submission to the municipal clerk before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If otherwise eligible, unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party to the appeal. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website. All persons who have made a request or have made a written or oral submission regarding a particular planning item will receive a notice of council's decision, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of decision must submit a written request to municipal clerk. Thank you.
Application 12A, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, Richard and Louise Colte, 4437 Kemp Line, Community of Tilbury East, West Kent. There are no conflict of interest and no deputations were received.
Is there anyone present other than the applicant or the agent with an interest in this application? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. Is the applicant here? Could I get Councillor Anderson and Councillor Harrigan to put this on the floor, please?
Yep, I'm happy to do that. So seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
Councillor McGrail?
Yes.
Councillor Story? Councillor Story, are you there?
Okay,
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 12B, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, the estate of William Darcy McHugh, 291 and 378 Watercrest Lane, Community of Raleigh, South Kent. No conflicts of interest were received and no deputations were received.
Is there anyone present other than the applicant or the agent with an interest in this application? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. Is the applicant here? So noted. Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Doyle, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to move it, Mayor Caniff.
Happy to second that.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor McGrail?
Yes.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
And Councillor Story? Okay. Councillor Wright?
Thank you.
Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 12C, application for zoning bylaw amendment, 1000472490 Ontario Inc., 98 and 100 London Road, Community of Thamesville, East Kent. No conflict of interest was received and no deputations were received.
Is there anyone present other than the applicant or the agent with an interest in the application? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. Is the applicant here? Duly noted. Councillor McDonald and Councillor Wright, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Yep, happy to move it.
I'll second it, thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
Councillor McGrail?
Yes.
Councillor Story?
Okay,
Councillor Bondi? Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. And the final planning application, 12D, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Jesse Hookstra, 23211 Walker Road, Community of Chatham City. No conflict of interest was received and no deputations were received.
Is there anyone present other than the applicant or the agent with an interest in this application? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. Is the applicant here? Councillor Crew and Councillor Allen, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
So moved.
Happy to second.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor McGrail?
Yes.
Councillor Finn?
Yes.
Councillor Story?
Okay,
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. Mr. Mayor, we'll now move on to deputations. Only one deputation was received this evening. It was an email only to council. It was on 18C, the motion of Councillor Bondi regarding the Chatham-Kent Community Hub cost, and it was from Christine Hewlett. We'll move on to the consent agenda now. Items pulled from the consent agenda are items 16A, tender award T25-103, supply in place maintenance gravel, pulled by Councillor Doyle. Item 16B, tender award T23-100, municipal grass cutting, pulled by Councillor Thompson and Councillor Sakachi. Item 17A, the 2023 early development instrument, it's pulled as an information report and presentation from staff. 17B, physical literacy Chatham-Kent project, pulled for an information report and presentation from staff. Item 18A, organic waste diversion feasibility study, results and recommendation, pulled for a presentation by staff. Item 18C, motion of Councillor Bondi regarding Chatham-Kent Community Hub cost, it's been pulled by the clerk. Item 19A, the 2024 BMA municipal study, pulled for a presentation from administration. 20A, the 2025 and 2026 municipal insurance renewal, pulled by Councillor Doyle. Therefore, the remaining reports will go on the consent agenda to be approved in one motion. Item 15A, B, C, item 18B, 19B and C, 21A, B and C, and 22A.
Councillor Bondi and Councillor Finn, can I get splits on the floor, please?
Yes, happy to move, Mayor Caniff.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn,
Yes.
Councillor McGrail,
Yes.
Councillor Story.
All votes
All
are in.
votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 16, tender awards.
16A, tender awards T25-103, supply in place maintenance gravel.
Councillor Doyle and Councillor C. McGregor, can I get splits on the floor, please?
Happy to move that.
Happy to second.
Councillor Doyle, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So my question is for Edward or Ryan. Just looking through the report here, it shows that Dover, Chatham, and Wallaceburg get dolomite quarry stone, 0 to 22 millimeters granular A. Thamesville, Kent Center Division, and Ridgetown get 0 to 19 millimeters granular A. And then Raleigh and Tilbury get crushed quarry stone granular A. So over my, I don't know, over the last very many years, it has always been said that Dover gravel roads seem to be the best. I've heard that time and time again, more so now that I've been on council, but definitely before as well. So it looks like they do get different stones, and that's one of the things that people can say too, is Dover gets better stones or better gravel than we do, and that's why their roads are better. So I just wondered what's the difference between kind of what Dover, Chatham, and Wallaceburg get compared to the rest of Chatham-Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. Historically, across Chatham-Kent, because it's a large area, the types of materials we have spec'd, we've been consistent over time because we've seen through pricing, because almost, a large portion of the cost of gravel is trucking. And so when you have a big geographical area, say what you were mentioning, the pit run gravel on say the more eastern communities, tends to be the cheapest over time because of trucking and proximity to the pits. Same thing on the west end. The dolomite you're referring to often comes off the docks in Sombra. And so over time, we've tried to be consistent with materials in geographic areas because although I've heard similar complaints that you have, we have had complaints in areas where we've changed gravel materials based on color, based on, limestone is kind of very different than pit run gravel. So we've been kind of consistent over time. We're happy to review that. If we spec'd, say, Sombra, dolomite into all of Chatham-Kent, those farther areas are going to see increased prices due to the trucking I mentioned. The other thing that you didn't mention was, even though our maintenance practices are all, pretty consistent across public works, there is geographical differences across Chatham-Kent due to drainage, due to underlying base materials. That also plays into how the road behaves, not just gravel. So these are the reasons. They're mainly historic and price-based onto why we've spec'd these specific materials. but happy to review that in the future.
Okay, thank you. I'm probably gonna get to that. Before I get to that, do you notice, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, would you say that Dover area and potentially Wallaceburg and Chatham areas, have less complaints overall than like Raleigh and like South Kent kind of thing?
You know, just based on my experience, not data, I would think that's not true in my experience. You know, we've had, you know, in the spring seasons, especially when the gravel roads are at their worst, I'd say we get complaints from all across Chatham-Kent. It's not, say, lower in Dover. I don't have that data.
Okay, and then, so you said you'd be happy to look at that in future, so I know we're too late for this year, but would you need a motion or something just to, not to say to use that, but at least do report on how much extra it would cost for the other parts of Chatham-Kent to use the dolomite quarry stone as well?
And I'm happy to review that. I don't think we need a motion. Obviously, we have an entire year to do this, and I'm happy to take that direction, to go back and review. We will have to talk to suppliers to try to understand, because the big thing about gravel is the logistics and how it's how much a quarry is making, how much is shipped into docks, even which gravel is coming from the U.S. versus which gravel is coming from Canadian sources. So there's a bit to unpack, but we're happy to take that away and bring back a report to council before we put out the tender next year to talk about the different types of materials and what the cost could be if we change them.
That would be amazing. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Ryan, just a thought. I know there's different types of gravel and different stuff, and I thought it had explained to me before that sometimes it's more to do with the base and different things. Like I am a Dover resident on a gravel road that is not a very good gravel road, but I think ours is based on drainage, not on the gravel type that you're putting on our roads. So wouldn't it depend often more as to the roads maybe that you're getting and the type of drainage that came with each of these areas when we amalgamated?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. It's a huge part of it. And if you remember in previous reports to council, when we talked about the gravel road conversion strategy and also the gravel road investigation, so we are only coming into year 2 of that investigation, where we did the first year. And this is the kind of information that study is doing over a 10-year period. We're trying to understand how much gravel are on these roads, what their base conditions of like, what improvements could be made. And I believe in the first round of studies we got back, there wasn't any comments about material. And we're talking about stone type. Dolomite or pit run gravel is like different geology. And so they do have different characteristics, say how hard the gravel is, and all the pieces in here are spec'd through OPSS spec. When we say granular A, that is a spec on the size of stone and the fines that are in the gravel, but the actual material is a granite, or example, are those different types of stone. So it plays a huge part, but that's something we can take back as well through that study and ask them, are there different materials we should be using? For instance, limestone roads out in the west end become very, very hard in the summertime, and that has some pros and cons to it. So these different types of gravel, like I said, if we go and change all of it, we have had complaints due to that too. So I think we'd be happy to look at that with a fine-tooth comb of, are we using the best practices? But also the drainage you mentioned and the base conditions and other improvements also play into the maintenance of a gravel road.
Thank you, and I guess that's more that I was indicating. It's just, there's more to it than just the gravel we're putting down. It's a combination of issues all over, and I guess our study will hopefully show the best practice and the best granular to be able to use going forward as we get through that study. So thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn?
Councillor
Councillor McGrail?
Yes.
And Councillor Story? Sorry, Councillor Story, I still cannot hear you. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. Moving on to 16B, tender award T23-100, municipal grass cutting.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I would move that we re-tender the remainder of the contract.
Councillor Scotchy, you second that?
Sure, yes.
Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I mean, I guess I could start off by kind of addressing what some people might already know. I used to cut grass. I used to be one of the subcontractors, I'll say, but I'm not anymore. That's why I didn't declare a conflict at the beginning. I haven't been for quite some time, actually. So with that out of the way, here's where I'm coming from. Back in 2023, when we awarded this contract, the Bank of Canada interest rate was about 4.5% and climbing. Inflation was 6.8% in 2022. And even in March, when we awarded this, the trailing 12 months was around 4.5% inflation. Today, the Bank of Canada interest rate's 2.75%. Inflation, while it's a little sticky, is still around 2%. I do still have a lot of contacts in the world, in the biz, as it were, so this is a little bit of inside baseball, but they say, and I believe them, not only could they have matched the low bids in light of the inflation and the interest rate numbers, looking better than they were when these contracts were awarded, and these companies had to take that into consideration. They are quite confident that they could beat them if they were to retender. That could potentially save Chatham-Kent taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next 3 years. And with that in mind, I think, and I admit, it's going to be a tight timeline. I think we should send this back out, retender it, and try to collect those savings for the taxpayers.
Any other questions? Councillor Wright? Oh, sorry, Councillor Scotchy, go ahead, and then Councillor Wright.
I guess just through you, Mayor Caniff, I had some general questions on the report. Am I still able to ask them, even though that there's a motion on the floor now, or I guess just to check for a point of order?
No, go ahead, and as long as it relates to the deferral and the contracts.
Yeah, so I guess just to Mr. Pollock, for the Director of Parks and Recreation Facilities, Rob, when we're doing these types of contracts, do we look at the, I guess, vulnerability of the people that we are approving the contracts to? I know through the Municipal Act, we are kind of restricted of, essentially the lowest bid, but given our past conversation that you had at the special meeting, when we're starting to look at some of these contractors and that, are we able to, and maybe the part of the question will be to Mr. Quinton, are we able to look at where the contractors are from, for instance, if they are an American-based company and those types of things? But the first and foremost, I just wanted to see if we're looking at like the substantiability of the contractors facilitating their duties for the entire contract.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rob Pollock, Director for Parks, Recreation Facilities. So through the purchasing policy and when we're going through a tender process, they do have to qualify as a successful bidder, and then there's a bonding part of that as well. So we do some vetting on that end. When we're dealing with contractors, any of them at any point could, end up ending their service with us, and we go through that process as well. So. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. David Taylor, Director of Legal Services. I thought I'd answer the question about looking at the location of bidders, particularly in the current climate with the U.S. We follow free trade agreements in relation to our purchases, but there are actual financial thresholds. So I would have to do a bit of analysis about whether this contract would actually fall underneath some of those financial thresholds, but also per the direction that council gave at the special meeting just recently about reviewing our purchasing processes in relation to American purchases. That's absolutely work that the administration is doing. So can't provide a concrete answer on this specific case, but it's absolutely something we're looking at to at least assess.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. One quick follow-up question before you leave, actually. Some people follow free trade agreements, not everybody, but some people do.
Agreed,
just I guess my hypothetical question from a legal perspective, if I was quoting for, let's say, pouring 10 driveways and all of a sudden there's now only 6 of them, or there's only 4 years left, doesn't it a whole new contract essentially? Like once you, like even though if it's not grass, but something, if we've opted into a contract for a specific time for a specific amount of parcels and that contract is now altered, can we just simply just give it to somebody who bid on essentially a different contract because the terms of the contract would be different? Is that not correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question. It's a balancing act about what the most appropriate way of dealing with this approach is, and certainly Mr. Pollock's team had consulted with ours about the approach to take here. The reason for the recommendation here is that there was a bid process that was relatively recent, and so there is some fairness also in looking to the next bidder down the list out of that. But certainly when there has been significant changes as well, there are some options to be looking at whether or not that contract can be continued. But I can confirm you that we discussed it with Mr. Pollock's team in terms of the approach to take here, and Legal Services was comfortable with the approach of going to the second bidder because there was that competitive bidding process that had happened, not too recently ago.
And the reason why I was asking, just to Councillor Thompson's motion, I guess, was that because they're already there, I know in the past you've provided, recommendations that once the bid's out there for us to, to essentially, it's out there now. But since this is a different one, there's no concerns with doing it this way then, right? Because essentially it's a different thing that's being proposed than we originally approved. It's not like the same as if it was going to tender after. It was exactly the same what we're asking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think if I understand, the warnings we've given in the past is don't re-tender twice for the same work kind of thing. There would be an option here if that's the way that council wants to go per this motion to re-tender if that's the direction that council wants to take, because it is a different kind of scope of work, if you will. But I also think that the recommendation here is defensible and an appropriate way to also consider this because of the recent purchasing process that we went through already. So I think both options would be available.
Thanks. Because my explanation before was as clear as mud, I just wanted to follow up with that question. Thank you.
I've got three other speakers, Councillor Wright, followed by Councillor C. McGregor, then Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor Thompson said to re-tender. Is this tenders that are already been accepted under a contract, or is this a different group? Like, I just don't understand what he was talking about there. Because maybe Trevor could explain more what he was talking about.
That didn't go. There we go. As I understand it, okay? So we'll preface with that. So there was a contract that went out. Brightonview, which is an American company with a Windsor office, decided that they weren't going to do it anymore. So as I understand it, then we decided, staff's recommendation is to go ahead and take basically the second bid, the next highest bid, and accept those. And I'm saying we should go out, maybe re-tendered is wrong, maybe just tendered. We should go out for tender, make it quick, and I think we can find savings. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor C. McGregor, followed by Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Just a question. I notice a lot of these new tendered contracts are for cemeteries. And I know that, I understand that Brightview is not there, but they actually did a fairly good job in our cemeteries. It certainly last year I had less complaints about the contract grass cutting in our cemeteries than I've ever had in my 3 terms of council. And so I'm just curious, just going to the second one, have any of these been vetted for or have you proven trackability of these companies that have been hired or that may be brought into these? It's been relatively nice having the piece of somebody who understands how to work in a cemetery. It's a lot different than cutting, say, in a local park than it is in a cemetery. So I'm just wondering if, or I guess I'm just understanding, this is certainly going straight to the second person on the list, so there has been no vetting, or do we have understanding of the job that will be performed if we go with these companies?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So some of the contractors on here currently cut grass on other packages and some don't. So they don't know the current packages or the current parcels, so we go through that the same as if we brought on someone new. And if we go to the retender or to the tender process, it would go to the compliant lowest bid as well. So we would have no guarantee on exactly who that would be. So we go through the same process with the second place bidders as we would with whoever won the tender bid, if we went that way.
So there's no consideration given to their track record or ability to be able to perform a decent job in our cemeteries. I'm trying to put it nicely. I've just, as much as the complaints I had in the past, so did you. So, you know, it's difficult sometimes when people don't quite understand or maybe respect the cemeteries and the people that have family and loved ones in there, that they get quite upset when things are not done nicely or properly within a cemetery, so.
Councillor Harry, I'm going to go to you quickly.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. Just because the tone of the conversation has changed, I'd like to just declare a conflict. My husband owns a grass cutting property management business, so if this were to go to tender, that would potentially impact that business. So I'll just not vote.
Thanks for that. Councillor McGrail, followed by Councillor Hall.
Question has been answered. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. And I apologize if this has been answered, but I might need Mr. Taylor to answer it again. When looking at this, and thanks for Councillor Thompson for clarifying, I understand what he's trying to do here, but I guess just in reference to our purchasing bylaw, and I think Mr. Pollock just mentioned it too, that, you know, it's part of our, is it within our bylaw that we, you know, the number two bidder, if something like this, you know, comes up and the number two acceptable bid becomes the, you know, the winner or gets the contract. I'm just wondering, do I understand that correctly? Is that within our bylaw? And if that's the case, by doing this and going out to tender again, is there any legal risk, I guess, to the municipality to make that move?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it's not specific to this situation. And the reason is that the contract continued for some period of time. Like the company that was successful in the previous bidding process did the work for a period of time, entered into a contract with us, and then came back later and said, we no longer want to do the future years. And so the purchasing bylaw doesn't really contemplate that exact situation, right? Like we've created a procurement document that goes out to the world, somebody bids, they get the work, and the whole contract is executed kind of thing, and continued for the whole term of the contract. In this situation, midway through, they told us we're leaving Canada and we're not going to work. So it's not a perfect situation in line with the purchasing bylaw. So we're kind of left with this imperfect situation. What's the best approach to take? One of the underlying principles that we're always trying to meet in purchasing decisions is like fairness to all the bidders. And that's really why administration in this report is recommending you go to the next bidder, right? Everybody had the opportunity to bid. They, I understand, are willing to kind of like follow through on their bid that was from a few years ago. And so that's a way of still discharging fairness to anybody who might be able to bid on it, because they could have bid on that contract. We're going to the second bidder. That's a fair approach to do. It also, but I don't believe that there's a legal issue with deciding, no, you know what, it's been enough time, we want to go out for a new tender for those remaining couple of years to line this contract up with the other ones. I think both are fair, reasonable approaches to take. Administration's recommending this one for the reasons kind of articulated in the report. I hope that helps, Councillor.
And just two things to add from more of a technical risk if we went to tender. There'd be a timing aspect. So we'd have to put it out for tender. It'd have to be out for a couple weeks. We'd have to evaluate those. We'd have to get someone on board. There's a chance that might be looking at closer to June. And then also, when we go out to tender, right now we have a secured price from 2023 when we went out to tender. The prices that we get in, there's no guarantee that we would have a lower price. It could be a higher price. So there is that risk that all the compliant bids come in at a higher price as well. So I just want to mention those two risks.
Mr. Dubin?
Yeah, so I agree with Mr. Pollock, but we wouldn't know whether or not we could get a lower price without actually going back to the market. So that's a risk that council has to take. I think Mr. Taylor answered the question that from a legal perspective, there's very little risk in terms of the bylaw. And I do agree that staffs always try to balance fairness, but I think if you were the third, fourth, or fifth person who bid, you might also say, well, now it's a shorter contract than it was before. It would be fair. So there's both sides of the coin. I think, quite frankly, this really is a council decision, and Mr. Pollock isn't trying to sway you one way or another. However, keep in mind that these processes do take some time. So it could be that for those particularly plots, maybe I shouldn't call them plots, but those lots, that there may be a little bit of a delay. Now, we can speed up the process as much as we can based on your decision tonight, but just be aware that there could be a delay because we thought we had a contractor in place and it's already end of March.
So Robert, I just want to clarify one thing, I guess, seeing no other questions, that if this passes, that, and let's say it doesn't happen till June, you will find someone else temporarily to cut those, or are those areas going to go uncut for the next month and a half, which could get really ornery over that period?
Yeah, so there's no guarantee that we'd get all the parcels cut through the municipality. We would go back and probably look at prioritizing which ones we'd be cutting, and probably delaying quite a few depending on which parcel it is. So we would have grass that wouldn't be cut. When it's supposed to be cut, we'd have more grass complaints, and there'd be certain parcels that we probably wouldn't get to. I think a few years ago, if everyone remembers, I think it was 2022, the amount of grass issues that we had when we didn't have the contractors in place on time. And so yes, we would most likely not get all the parcels cut, and there'd be a lot of long grass in different areas.
Well, I guess to answer, just to further that, we have lined up these individual second contractors. Could we not go to them and saying, here, we will pay you to do 2 or 3 whatever the number of cuts, and please submit another bid to fill in? Because if we're going to go to them now, that means they should be ready. And so I'd like to think that we can fill in somehow with this process. Like, what I don't want to do is sit in here a month and a half from now and there's 3-foot grass out there and we can't cut it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can just interject here. Edward Sobel, General Manager of Infrastructure and Engineering Services. While we'll do our best to get contractors, and while we can go and speak to those that we have lined up to take this on, there's no guarantee, A, that they can do it, or we'll do it for the price that they've stipulated. So I know when we add extra pieces or extra parcels to the contracts that we currently have, we have to get a price from them. And if they knew they were having a 3-year contract, maybe they would keep that price. But if they're being asked to only cut grass for a month or 2, they won't come back. My guess would be that they wouldn't be coming back with that same price, and that we'd have to negotiate a price with them. So there is that risk as well.
Yeah, if I can just suggest, if council passes this motion, then we'd move as quickly as we can. If we get to a point where it can't move fast enough for some of those parcels to be cut, then we'll do our very best to prioritize them and find somebody who can cut them if we can. Well, we won't know until we start the process to see how long it's going to take. I guess a question, if I can, Mr. Mayor, I'll just ask a question of Mr. Pollock. So it wasn't that long ago that we went out to the market. That was pretty clear in some of the questions that occurred. Is there an ability for us to shorten the timeline, given that we're not asking for RFPs to be submitted on all of the parcels, but just a portion? And if we hadn't gone out that long ago, do we need to provide as much time as we normally do for this type of process?
Thank you for the question. We'd follow the same process, so it would take the same amount of time. We'd put it out for 2 weeks, we'd get it evaluated, so it wouldn't shorten the time.
Councillor Crew?
Thank you. I guess this is for you, Rob. So all of the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the recommendations, all of those recommendations have agreed that they can step in and fill this part of the contract. I'm sorry if I'm repeating something somebody already said. they have, so they can step in and continue on.
Yes, if we go with the recommendations as is, they can step in right away and take it over, because it's a longer-term contract and they're ready to do that.
And if we go with this, we may have to wait till May, June, till everybody's in place, and then we know we get grass complaints anyway. If it rains a lot, if we have a nice moist summer, we get them. However, if we go with this, we're guaranteed we're gonna have some long grass, especially in our cemeteries. Okay. I know that legally we're probably in an okay spot to do this, but I just feel that I'm going to go with the recommendations, and that's the only reason. One less complaint about grass.
Councillor Sakachi, then Councillor Thompson, final thoughts, anything?
No, I think that I'm good, Mayor Caniff.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
The only thing I would add is I appreciate everybody's concerns. Nobody wants a repeat of the great grass debacle of 2022, where a vast majority of the municipality went uncut, and some contractors were taking on some projects on like a per-cut basis. Nobody wants that. This is much smaller. I think it's far more feasible, and to be totally honest, like I'll put what's left of my tattered reputation on the line. It will come in cheaper. I'm sure of it. And if the grass is long for a week or two, I mean, I don't think that's too much to pay to get a better deal for our taxpayers. Thank you.
All right, we'll put it to vote.
So the motion is that the remainder of the contract be retendered. Councillor Finn?
Yes.
Councillor McGrail?
Yes.
Councillor Story?
Yes.
Thank you. I can hear you now, Councillor Story. All votes are in. Motion passes 14-3 with one conflict.
We'll go on to item 17, Health and Human Services.
17A, 2023 Early Development Instrument. We have a presentation from staff. And Mr. Mayor, I understand that the 17B, the Physical Literacy Chatham-Kent project, is at the end of this presentation, and we also have a presentation from staff. So I'm assuming they're doing it one after the other?
Yes, I'll stop in between if there's any questions of the first presentation. We'll just go directly into the second one.
Perfect, thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Sapatero, the Program Evaluator with Child Care and Early Years. And we have received our early development instrument that is done by the McMaster Offord Center for Children's Studies and completed with kindergarten students. So the reason we bring this to council is because we want to highlight how the early years matter as it relates back to being a social determinant of health, looking at the development within the early years. So the Early Development Instrument, or will be further referred to as the EDI, is a tool that's used by kindergarten teachers to assess the senior kindergarten children's developmental health and their readiness to transition from the early years into the school age, so from senior kindergarten into grade 1. And this has been done in Ontario since 2005 and has continued through 6 cycles to allow for us to assess the development within Ontario and the municipality as a whole. So in terms of the relationship to social determinants of health, the Early Development Instrument looks at a measurable health relevant concept for long-term effects of how children and communities' healthy development impacts their development through life and in their educational outlooks. So there's also been research that has shown that there's relationships between the neighborhood level EDI scores. socioeconomic and demographic contexts. So this means that they relate it back to the neighborhoods in which they may live in and the different contexts of those neighborhoods, how it can impact the children's development into further later years and their educational achievement. So there has been associations between the educational achievement, employment rates, criminal activity, substance use, and mental health issues later in life that may be related back to the early years in their developmental outcomes. So we in the Child Care and Early Years Division use the Early Development Instrument to monitor the different variability and then change over the years and use it within our community and for different partners to help plan programs that may reduce vulnerability and increase the likelihood of having more community health. So the EDI looks at 5 different developmental domains on 3 scales. So it ranks them on track, at risk, or vulnerable. Looking at the social competence, their physical health and well-being, emotional maturity, language and cognitive development, and communication skills and general knowledge. So this is done through a 103 question assessment for the kindergarten teachers, and they must be with their teacher for 6 months prior to the assessment being completed. And when looking at the scores to put them within the on track, at risk, or vulnerable, on track includes children's scores that are above the 25th percentile, so they're considered typically developing. There's at risk, which score between the 10th and the 25th, so they're neither vulnerable or on track in one or more domains. And then vulnerable is below the 10th percentile in one or more of the domains that they're being assessed on. So for Chatham-Kent's vulnerability in the 2023 cycle, we had a vulnerability rate of 28.6, which is considered significantly lower than the Ontario rate by 2.5%. So this is indicating that the developmental vulnerabilities within Chatham-Kent is actually lower than Ontario, showing that we are making progress into creating a very early years friendly community and improving our community health and development. So as you can see from the graph on the screen, when looking at the different 5 domains, it shows the on track in the green, the at risk in the yellow, and the vulnerable in the red. When comparing this back to Ontario's score, we are lower in vulnerable children in 4 of the 5 domains. The only one we are higher than is for physical health and well-being, although it's not statistically significant when looking at the data. So when looking at this overall, we have about 1 in every 3.5 children in Chatham-Kent are considered developmentally vulnerable. So we are doing well, but it is also something to focus on when looking at program planning with different community partners. Analysis has also been done internally with the data set to look at different neighborhoods. So we have it broken down into 10 different neighborhoods that are similar to those of the wards, looking at 3 within Chatham, Wallaceburg as a whole, and then Dresden, Bothwell, Thamesville, Ridgetown, Blenheim, Tilbury, Wheatley, and Payne-Court. So the scores within these neighborhoods are based on the children's postal code and where they live, rather than which school they may be attending or which school board. So as indicated in the map, you can see that those with higher vulnerability are dark red, and those with low vulnerability are more the white pink color. So you can see that East Chatham and Wallaceburg neighborhoods tend to be higher in rates of vulnerability for the children within the senior kindergarten years. You can also see for the neighborhoods is looking at the different domains. So based on the children living in those neighborhoods in 2023, the northeastern areas within Chatham-Kent tend to be more vulnerable within the physical health and well-being. So that's looking at the gross and fine motor skills, in addition to physical independence, their readiness for the school day, and other questions like that. And then looking at more the southwestern, we tend to have more vulnerability within emotional maturity. So that's where we like to suggest to different community partners for program planning. So within the childcare and early years and the different partners, we've been using this data to communicate with different community partners within action tables and groups on how we can inform the programs and further decision making with the data that's relevant to the early years. So we mobilize this data to both internal and external stakeholders and partners through the presentations like this. Some have been public health. We've done the early on programs, school boards, and planning groups such as the Child and Youth Planning Network to help inform the different service planning. And this is also in the works with the Child and Youth Planning Network to help improve the services that are available to different communities based on the needs that are being displayed within those neighborhoods. So I would like to thank you and open the floor for any questions prior to physical literacy.
Any questions? You obviously did a great job presenting because we've answered all their, oh, Councillor Harrigan.
No, I still think you did a great job and answered all the questions. I guess it's maybe a comment question. So just looking at the heat map there that showed the two areas where we have higher levels of vulnerability in Wallaceburg and then East Chatham, I noticed that they are not only higher in Chatham-Kent, but those ones are higher than the provincial average. And it looks like in one case more than 10% higher than the provincial average. And so through then early years, or perhaps with public health, I guess, depending on the area of vulnerability, is there planning that's done in response to us seeing this data? Like for me, this is a bit shocking, right? Like based on the neighborhood or postal code that a 3-year-old could live in some cases, they have double the likelihood of being more vulnerable to continue to develop into, successful childhood. This is kind of what I understand the EDI score is for. So I'm just wondering if you can talk about the program strategy that comes after we see data like this.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. So looking at the higher vulnerability areas, so as highlighted in this map is Wallaceburg and East Chatham, we do take into consideration the different contexts within those neighborhoods. So some may be the average income levels in addition to the services that are available. So some of those may be impacted by lower population within this EDI cycle. So looking at the schools that are in that area. Also looking at the services available. So when looking in Wallaceburg, for example, you can see that there may be less child and youth programming that will help translate into more healthy growth and development within the early years. So this is one thing that we are communicating to all the community partners that we work with, in addition to public health, multiple teams within their division, and working on planning and the different programs that could possibly help improve that. So working on early on programs that are focused more on the vulnerabilities there, or different programs within both municipal and external partners. Also, one thing that has been brought up in many of the presentations is transportation. So reaching out further to municipal transportation services and seeing how we can all collaborate together to make it as accessible and available as we can.
Great, thank you. I think there was another report that passed in consent earlier around some support for programming, and I feel like these types of maps and how we respond to this rather than just a blanket Chatham-Kent solution is really, this kind of justifies some of the outcomes that we at council have to talk about when we look at kind of neighborhood programs or neighborhood level initiatives. It's not so much about whether Councillor Harrigan gets something in her ward versus Councillor Crew. It's more about how do we ensure that our community can all really thrive, and that means people need different things. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Councillor Story.
I wanted to thank Laura and the team for this great report. I thought it was very informative and it's eye-opening as well. I had the same question as Councillor Harrigan, so I will leave that. Appreciate that additional question on that front. Do we have any sense, Laura, about whether or not the pandemic had any impacts on these results? I see that this report's from the 22-23 cohort, and that would have been the time when folks were coming out of perhaps pandemic income support, and with more information coming to us from public health that we have more families using food banks, that type of thing has increased. Do we have a sense of what any of these outcomes have changed substantially in the last 3 years since that data has been released? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. So in terms of the pandemic, we can look at the development in terms of how social isolation and the lack of being in childcares or different social settings may impact those domains. However, that research is being completed within different child studies labs. So this is highlighted through the McMaster offered Center for Children's Studies. It's also being completed a lot within the BC Lab for Children's Studies. So referring back to that literature, however, on a Chatham-Kent demographic, it would be more of a longitudinal look when we relate back to different educational outcomes such as the EQAOs or the assessments. However, it is very hard to work on linking that data. So the outcomes from the pandemic can't fully be related back to these results, but they may have been influenced by the effects from the pandemic on the child development.
I agree the data for Chatham, which is my ward, but I would certainly, I think we'd all be concerned wherever ward it was located. The report states the initiative and program planning will target neighborhood vulnerabilities. Could you give us an programs are being rolled out? Since this was provided, looks like May 2024, if I'm reading it correctly. Are any of these programs currently underway, or are you still working on that? Thank you.
So due to the timeline with the cycle, the assessment was completed in 2023 on the senior kindergartens. It was done in approximately June from the kindergarten teachers, and then it was further divided within McMaster, and we received our report and our data set in May of 2024 last year, and that's when we took the further analysis in breaking it down into the neighborhoods that are displayed here. So we don't have concrete plans and programs rolling out yet. Rather, it's informing that of the work with our community partners to make the program planning.
The information with community partners and hope that they can use it to effectively plan, and then but also provide early on programming on behalf of the province, and then the programming we do as a municipality would take those findings into consideration as well. Is that sort of a fair assessment of how we would use this important data? Thank you.
Yes, that would be fair to say that we are working on sharing the data to inform more of the planning that will continue on.
been frozen for some time. And do we have any sense of when those might be unfrozen by the province? Clearly, we need this funding, and I'm just trying to figure out what our options are to advocate for that to be unfrozen. Thank you. My last question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Josh Myers, Director of Child Care in Early Years. Thank you, Councillor Story. I just wanted to circle back on some of the questions about the neighborhood level data. I've been in this role for, I think, 3 weeks now. And one of the things I wanted to share is every meeting that I've gone to, so Child, Youth, and Planning Networks, other community level strategic groups, they're looking at these maps and they're planning programs. So it's not just municipal programming that's focusing on this, which is hard, or partly why we're hesitant to talk about initiatives. There's a number of different groups in the community that are targeting these groups to see what can we do with our programming to make sure that hopefully in the next report we see some changes here, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to report back on municipal-led initiatives in the future. With respect to the early on programming and funding freezes, yes, that is accurate. I do know the Ontario Municipal Social Services Association has recently launched a series of webinars on the funding freezes. I can't share more on the advocacy that's coming, but I do know that it's across the province that early on funding has been frozen. It certainly plays a role in communities, and it is certainly a way for us to get ahead of some of the other issues that you've heard me speak about in the past. And so, although I don't have a timeline on or any word from the province on when that may be changing, it's certainly on the minds of lots of other communities.
Councillor C. McGregor. Oh, sorry, Councillor Story, you done? Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. And I was going to bring this up in the next report, and Josh just kind of alluded to it. Do we think that we might see, and maybe Sherman can bring it up in his report, but the physical literacy project do you think that will maybe help in areas moving forward, or are these the kind of initiatives that might be taking place within our communities that might then aid? I know his project is educating kind of the educator and how to introduce programs and such, but other than that, you can comment on that, and just so I don't have to re-comment, I just wanted to thank you. It is a very good and very detailed report, and thank you very much for bringing it this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. So in terms of the physical literacy, we don't have the data linked fully to what Chris Sherman will be presenting. However, because this is done in the senior kindergarten years, it's more to inform the physical development prior to entering into the school years. But I know they have done some work with the early years educators, but Chris will be able to extend on that much more.
Thanks. We'll go on to the next presentation now.
This presentation is on physical literacy, Chatham-Kent project.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public, I'm just going to provide a short overview of the concept of physical literacy. So not so much the details of the project that you can find in the report, but rather what physical literacy is and why it's important to overall and as a foundation for overall healthy growth and development. Before I begin, I'd just like to kind of comment on Laura's presentation and clarify the EDI scores and information that she presented, while somewhat related, are not a direct reflection or measure of physical literacy. But what it does help to highlight is the significant gap and the need for continued efforts in supporting development of children's physical health and well-being. So first I want to provide a bit of context just about health promotion as it relates to our work in public health. Compared to the traditional medical model, which often views health just as the absence of disease, our efforts are focused upstream on prevention and health promotion. By definition, health promotion efforts work to allow people and communities to increase control over and improve their health by promoting healthy behaviors, creating supportive environments, and encouraging healthy public policies. when it comes to healthy behaviors, the benefits of physical activity are far-reaching. The list shown here is actually a short list, including only those of the main benefits which have been shown moderate to strong evidence of effect through the research. So what's important and often not recognized is not only the benefits to our physical health, our heart health, and chronic disease prevention, but it's extremely important to other aspects of health as well, including bone health, injury prevention, sleep, and both brain function, such as thinking, memory, and attention, as well as mental health benefits like decreased risk of anxiety and depression, and overall improved quality of life. Despite knowing all of these benefits, most adults and children are still not getting enough physical activity, and this formed part of our collective action challenge for the project. So you might be wondering, kind of where are we at now? Laura just spoke to the physical health and well-being scores as part of the EDI, which are really driving vulnerability rates, not just here, but across the province. But in addition to that, some of the more current data there, 89% of CK children and youth ages 12 to 17 do not meet the physical activity guidelines. And for reference, the physical activity guidelines for that age group are roughly 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every day. So in our work in public health, rather than focusing just on the behavior and trying to get people more active, over the last decade, we've began to focus more on building a strong foundation of skills and value of movement. And that's where this concept of physical literacy comes in. By definition, physical literacy is the motivation, the confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and understanding to value and take responsibility for engagement in physical activities for life. Here is somewhat of a basic illustration of the physical literacy cycle. It begins with competence, so learning fundamental movement skills, developing a large movement vocabulary, and then as children and even adults learn and become more competent in these skills, they develop confidence in their abilities, which can then increase motivation to participate in physical activity. Through regular participation, as you can see on the cycle, they can continue to maintain their competence, even learn new skills, and the cycle continues. Being physically active at the same time has been connected and linked through literature to building relatedness and connectedness. And whether it's social connections with other people, other groups, or a connection to nature and their environment, or even to their broader community. At the same time, it fosters fun and enjoyment, all of which are critical, again, to fueling motivation. It is important to note that positive experiences in physical activity in any setting can reinforce this cycle, but at the same time, negative experiences can also limit development and in some cases even break the cycle. This graphic from Sport for Life really helps illustrate the importance of fundamental movement skills and the impact on future participation. So in a general sense, if a person has not had the opportunity to learn fundamental movement skills enough to feel confident in their abilities, it really limits their future participation in a number of activities. At the same time, you can think about the benefits of having a large movement vocabulary and how that can open doors to participation in a very broad range of activities as they age. Physical literacy is not just for sports and recreation. It's important in all aspects of life. It's important for employment and developing a durable, productive workforce, especially in jobs that require a high level of physicality, such as construction and many skilled trades, firefighting, policing, armed services, even nursing and healthcare. It's important for everyday activities at home and in the community, such as climbing stairs, carrying groceries, walking on slippery surfaces, and doing other chores around the house. It's also important for injury prevention, being able to lift, carry, and react to our environments to avoid collisions and falls, which becomes increasingly important as we age. And as I mentioned earlier, it's important for leisure and recreation activities and performance arts, as we were able to see here firsthand just a few moments ago. So how can we support quality physical literacy experiences? And there are really three areas that we focused on throughout the project, with a strong emphasis on the first one. People, having knowledgeable, competent, and trained leaders, instructors, educators, and coaches that value and understand how to foster the development of physical literacy. Programs, both structured and unstructured, that are accessible, developmentally appropriate, progressive, and challenging. And then places that are both physical environments and settings, either indoor facilities or natural outdoor spaces, and also social environments that are safe, inclusive, and fun. So when we think about physical literacy experiences, if we're evaluating success of a program from our traditional public health lens around physical activity, we would just be looking at things like the number of steps that they taken, the type of activity, and the total time spent in physical activity. However, when you change the perspective and look at it through a physical literacy lens, it opens up the door to a much more comprehensive number of pieces that they could evaluate. So are they exposed to a variety of activities? Is there opportunity to learn and develop new skills? Are they building confidence in their abilities? Does it help build connections to others, to their environment and their community? And also, above all, is there an element of enjoyment and fun that will assist them in wanting to come back? In closing, building community capacity to develop physical literacy allows program leaders to be more intentional in creating an active community by design. By providing a foundation for movement and healthy development through physical literacy enriched teaching and instruction, physical literacy enriched environments, and physical literacy enriched policies and frameworks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my presentation.
Any questions? Councillor C. McGregor?
I would just say thank you, and a very good explanation. The reason I had kind of targeted on the other was that I did notice in your report that it was also early years teachers and trainers that were also a part of the project. So thank you very much.
Councillor Story?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks to Chris and the whole team. This is very interesting and very much appreciated. I see the data is from 2017 for the Chatham-Kent Health Status Report on chronic disease. Do we have anything more recent to see if those numbers have changed at all since 2017? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the health status report was that was the last or most current formally developed report that we had through public health. However, we have access to, our epidemiologists, our foundational standards team have access to more current data, and there's different timelines associated with depending on what you're looking at, but there is more recent data. What I can tell you is that for the most part, the general trends have stayed the same in all of those areas. So really no change overall.
Thank you. Now, is there a phase 2 part of this? Any sort of further programming or assessment now that the physical literacy project has been completed? I want to give kudos to the team for training over 1,000 leaders. That's a very impressive number. So are we measuring now whether or not that training is leading to more programming and any change in our overall?
Yes, we've the collaborative partnership did apply for phase 2 funding just recently. Unfortunately, that application was unsuccessful. However, we continue to explore with our partners some opportunities, some more feasible opportunities to continue kind of the momentum and delivering capacity building initiatives in 2025. With our sector partners in childcare, education, recreation, as well as some other partners even in Lambton. So.
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate all the work that you did on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chris, thanks so much for the presentation. Much appreciated. Item 18, infrastructure and engineering services.
18A, organic waste diversion feasibility study, results and recommendation. We have a presentation from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for having me. It's Ryan Brown, Director of Public Works, and the Waste Management team has been really busy to prepare all the work for this presentation this evening. We're here to talk about Chatham-Kent's Organic Waste Diversion Program, and I'll start with maybe not to use the I had to use the mouse, excuse me. So we'll start with a little bit of background about the program. So under the Ontario's Food and Organic Waste Policy Statement, Chatham-Kent is required to divert 50% of our organic waste in urban settlements. So we've been working on this since 2023. There's been numerous council reports here, and we've also been doing active public engagement on the CK Let's Talk page, as well as in person at our transfer stations polling residents. We looked at three things about the feasibility of this program, what we would do. So we looked at green bin programs. These are, what you would see in other communities where you have a green bin that you put your food waste in and it's picked up at your curb on a regular basis. We looked at non-curbside diversion. So these are things that are more for residents to use at home. So, you would have a backyard composter where you'd put your food scraps. There are technologies out there where you can have composting in the home on like a kitchen countertop, for example. And we also looked at leaf and yard waste collection, which is something we do now in Chatham-Kent on a smaller scale. And we looked at what those options are for a conceptual program. So looking at the timeline, all through 2024, we were working on program development. And so we were looking at best practices from, competing jurisdictions. We've been completing our waste composition study, which council supported us to go ahead. And that's people are actually picking up bags of garbage and sorting it out and gathering the data of what our garbage is actually comprised of. We've been doing public engagement, as I mentioned, through the Let's Talk page, public surveys and information sessions. And where we're at today is the actual program design. So how would we take all this data and what kind of program should Chatham-Kent have? So I want to look at our current status. So we took all the historic data we have, and then we also combined it with what we've learned in these waste audits. And 3 of the 4 of those have been completed. We're doing a 4-season program to capture the seasonal variation in waste. And so what we know, we have about 36,000 tons of waste per year that are being landfilled. And what we know now is that about 15 kilograms per household per week are being landfilled in our curbside communities versus in non-curbside, so those who are going to a transfer station are generating about 6 kilograms per household per week. And so through our waste audits, we've determined that about 48% of the 36,000 tons we create is organic waste. And we know now that that's comprised of approximately 15% plant-based products, so your grass, your leaves, flower clippings, as opposed to non-plant, which would be food waste, being a big component of that. And the only organic diversion program we have currently is, as I mentioned, the leaf and yard waste collection program that some is done curbside by Public Works, and some is at our depots where you can bring leaf and yard waste or different things to the transfer stations. And so a little bit of math. What is the diversion rate? Because this is really important to go forward to explain the next steps. So we have, what is our diverted waste that is not being landfilled divided by the total waste we generate? And that includes the diverted waste and the landfilled waste. And with that, Chatham-Kent's numbers are overall, curbside and everyone, we're diverting about 39% of organic waste. And in curbside areas, we know that's about 31%. In non-curbside areas, that's almost 73%. And so, as I mentioned, because of this policy, we needed to look at ways, how do we go from 31% to 50% to meet the mandate? So I have here a table, this is in the council report, explained in detail, but basically these are the explored solutions that the team has been working on over the, since 2023. And I want to go through them briefly, and what's really important to look at is the diversion rate increase. So option one, do nothing, as per the policy, is not an option, but this is the baseline, that in a curbside area, we have about 31% diversion. We looked at a backyard composter program. This is mandatory by legislation that we shall offer a program. I know there's been a few questions about, is it mandatory that people participate? No, it's mandatory that the municipality provide backyard composters at cost or below cost to residents, and that program would be completely voluntary. We'd obviously have a big promotion and education about how to use that and so forth, but this would be to purchase composters, hand them out to the community. So we looked at option two, and we broke this down into three very different options. Obviously, this is kind of a big undertaking and complicated, so we looked at three specific options. One is standardizing the leaf and yard waste program across Chatham-Kent, and that would be a program that is potentially different levels of service than they exist now. It would be a standardized collection bi-weekly, and that would be the same in every community because, as you're aware, I've been here before and talked about, it varies very differently across Chatham-Kent depending on what urban area you're in. But I'll jump forward to 2B, which is the option we've recommended in the report. And what this would do is create a standardized level of service for all communities. So some communities, including Chatham, don't have any curbside pickup right now. So we set a standard level of service and said, okay, for those outlying communities that have somewhat of a service now, if they're under what we're proposing, we would bring them up to the standard. But Thamesville and Ridgetown have a service that's quite high. And so we said, okay, what if we left those two alone at the highest level of service, but we went to standardized everywhere else? And option 2C is to say, let's take that highest level of service that we offer today and let's give that to everyone. And so those three options have some significant difference in cost. The main one being with the number of operators and the capital dollars you'd require to bring up to the highest level of service, mainly due to leaf vacuuming, which is currently offered in Thamesville and Ridgetown. And to do that in our big urban centers would be quite the undertaking and require a lot of operators and capital investment. We looked at a depot-based food waste digester pilot program. And this was in response to, through our surveys with the public, even residents in rural areas who we've seen from the data are doing a great job diverting organic waste. We heard from them that this is something they're interested in too. Could I bring my organics to the transfer station? I bring my garbage, I bring my recycling. Could I bring my food scraps too? And so what this is it's actually a machine, say the size of a washing machine, that we would purchase and install at the transfer station. Residents there we're proposing Harwich, could come and bring their food scraps, put it in, and it actually compost it, just like these kitchen top units, and we would try it and see what kind of participation we're getting, how it works, and understand the cost better before we would ever, say purchase more or go to a larger program. We've talked about and reviewed the countertop digester option, which would be available for residents to get from the municipality. And then we looked at a true green bin program that we've seen in other communities where we'd have regular service at all curbside areas. You'd have a garbage bin and a green bin. And after reviewing all those options, what we're here recommending tonight is three of them. And what we're saying is that we go with the backyard composter program. It's mandated that we do this, and we would purchase a bulk quantity of these units in like a shipping container size. And we'd keep them, we'd distribute them through our municipal centers, much like we used to distribute recycling bins, and we'd have a price of $20, and we can implement that in 2026. We then are recommending 2B, which we feel is a good balancing of all the options. It is a major change to how we do leaf and yard waste here in Chatham-Kent. And we would implement that for 2027. The biggest reason for the delay is the procurement of collection vehicles. Garbage trucks takes some significant time. And then also we're recommending that we try the food waste hub pilot, as I was describing at the Harwich Depot. We'll obviously report back to council on how that's going and if it's something we should elaborate in our communities. And through these programs, I said we're at 31% diversion in curbside areas, and we believe by doing this, our data shows that we could enhance diversion in curbside communities by 20%, bringing us to 51% diversion rate of organics. And so I wanted to share this slide just as a little bit more about what this program would look like. So for instance, in Chatham, where there is no leaf and yard waste pickup now, everyone would get a bi-weekly curbside collection from April to November of leaf and yard waste. They would have a Christmas tree collection, and we would bring them to the eastern communities. Ridgetown and Thamesville would remain the same at their higher level of service. We have the existing equipment there with the leaf vacuum, and that would remain. And the details are we would have to hire 8 operators. One of those operators in the public works budget is already funded through leaf and yard waste. So we would have 10 new FTE total to implement this program. We'd buy 4 collection trucks. We have a shop that we can retrofit to house this crew. And we'd also be implementing 2 new scales at our rural transfer stations. One of the challenges we have now, we only have 1 scale at the Wallaceburg Depot for the weighing of waste. And when you start to calculate all these numbers, although it seems perhaps silly to weigh leaves and sticks as they come in, it's really important for these programs to understand how much waste is actually coming into our facilities to prove that we're meeting this program. And we have our estimated capital and operating costs that would be area rated service because only curbside areas would receive this. Also presented in the report is the table of capital and operating costs and what the totals are and how we would fund them. If council remembers, in the past, in the multi-year budget, we included an earmark because we knew this was coming. We were working on the details, and the details there present that most of the money, if you can see there for 27, we had earmarked in the multi-year budget process at just over $2 million, and the total program costs for 27 would require a $2.1 million increase to the budget. So just slightly higher than we had already baked into the multi-year budget process. Those are the details. I know it's a complicated program. I'm happy to answer any questions. Huda is here as well, who's been working extensively on this project.
Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a quick question actually, I'm going to ask a question to Gord first, Mr. Brown. So I noticed that the cost is essentially doubled of what we expected. And often when we're talking about different studies and all that and different downloads, we can show a percentage of what those downloads are and how much has been downloaded to us. But a lot of the studies that we get around budget time doesn't reflect legislation change that they're implementing to the municipalities, and the fact that there's, in that little slide, if you go back, can you go back to the slide? In that slide there, and maybe I'm wrong, I did read the report multiple times to see if I caught it, but in that slide, I don't see any additional funding to cover this whatsoever. So is this just simply legislation change that's going to be, reflected to all municipalities to recover on their tax, their property tax?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Similar to many regulations and legislation that gets passed by the province, it can be in our emergency services, it can be in homelessness response. There's a lot of ways that legislation downloads to property tax bill increases, and this is absolutely one of them.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Caniff, in their recommendations, I was hoping to add a number 7, just for council to request full funding from the province to implement their legislation. I know it probably won't go very far, but I think it's important never to miss an opportunity to at least advocate and ask. And then I did have one question, if somebody supported that motion, amendment, sorry.
Oh, it's Councillor Scacchi. Well, are you going to move everything then, including
Correct,
that
yes,
amendment? Okay,
yes.
and Councillor Doyle was the second person, so Councillor Doyle, you'll second that?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, go ahead.
And then I guess the last comment or question will be just to Huda, you know, we are able to speak quite often at the liaison committees, the landfill liaison committees, and just a couple of things that I was just looking at. So obviously this is really important to divert waste, but the one thing I don't think that's very reflective here in the municipality is that, you know, we essentially, they estimate we have 9 to 10 years left in Ontario for landfills. The one thing that's never discussed though, and I think that it's important for us as a municipality to look at, because it doesn't affect us though, is that around 25 to 30% of all waste in Ontario is actually transferred to Michigan. Is that roughly an accurate number, Huda? Are you aware of those numbers, if they are accurate at all?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's about right.
So I guess the concern is that we have to do our part to do the best we can to divert, you know, what we can. But my concern is that, I know it's not specifically about this, but my biggest concern is that we all know how good the relationship right now is between the United States and Canada, and the potential implications for us hosting a large landfill of what can possibly look like if they start adding additional cost to waste or not taking our waste anymore. So I'm just hoping that we have a plan in place to continue to advocate for our community, and then also that we do whatever we can, like diversion, to ensure that we try to maximize the landscape of the amount of waste we take in on a yearly basis. Because as we know, that we just had to approve 300,000 more tons per year, which is restricting our you know, our abilities within our own community. Thank you.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Scacchi, for that amendment. That was a good one. So just to be clear on this, Ryan, so because this was already put into our budget, I know we're a little bit higher, but essentially there's not going to be a tax increase for this in this 4-year budget term.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. So I just wanted to reiterate that this service would be area rated. So only those who receive the service would pay the levy, very similar to how it works now in the communities that receive this. So Gord can correct me, but in the budget process, when they talk about the tax increase that we meet, those are generally the numbers for the total tax levy. They do not include area rated services because not the entire municipality. So in the budget book, this money was earmarked for this program, but it's area rated only and doesn't go into that overall number that was presented during the 2025 update budget for the forecasted 26 and 27 tax increases, because the area rated numbers don't show up in that overall levy.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. I did not realize that. So what, next one, what is our penalty with provincial government if we don't do this?
So Mr. Taylor can add to my comments, but you know, as an administrator, I think I can only advise to follow legislation of the land and not provide you advice to not follow it. As far as penalties, not sure.
Okay, and then is there anything, so this gets us up to 51%. Is there a number we can get to that would still make us compliant? A lower number we can get to that would still make us compliant with the new legislation?
As I mentioned, we did a lot of work through our data analysis. This is still somewhat theoretical. After we implement this program, by the addition of the scales and some time and implementation, we will have new numbers to come back to you to confirm. The number to be compliant is 50, and hopefully through this program, we could see that our numbers are accurate, that we are at the 50% target, because what we aren't proposing tonight is a full green bin program. Many communities that have implemented the green bin program have already had substantial leaf and yard waste collection for 10, 20 years, and were not at their targets, and then are implementing green bin to be compliant with the legislation. We feel we'd like to try this, go back, confirm all our numbers, and 4 or 5 years come back to council and say, here are the average numbers. We believe we are achieving 50% diversion without having to go to the additional cost of an actual green bin program.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Sounds like it's our cheapest option for the time being. So thank you very much for all the hard work.
Councillor Wright, followed by Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Ryan. On line 2, can you put that up on the screen? Or, line 2 on our study, yes.
Sorry, Councillor, recommendation 2.
Yes, yes.
Meredith, number 2 recommendation you'd like on the screen, thanks.
My question is, when it gets up anyways, is we're back to clear bags again. Last year, did we not pass it through that we're gonna go to paper bags this year? So we could save on staff time for cutting the bags open? And the paper bags were supposed to be environmentally friendly and all that. Like, did we not pass that through to go to paper bags? And now we're back to clear again?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we did pass that leaf and yard waste will be collected in paper bags.
Well, in your sections there, you got clear bags again.
I'm sorry, sir, I don't see that.
Oh, well, I got it. And here, Bothwell resident, or Ridgetown residents, clear bags. It's in the brush and leaf and yard waste pickup.
Thank you, Mr.
Must be
Mayor.
in clear, transparent bags, yeah.
The appendix to the report is the service levels we had set
Is
since
that
decades.
today's level, or?
That's not reflective of the recommended program service levels. So the current program, the recommended program will be using bags or pails or brush that is tied, but there won't be any plastic bags in the new program. The appendix was just reflective of what we have had in the past couple of decades.
So are we using paper from now on? It's 'cause, yeah.
Sorry, I understand your question
Yes.
now, Councillor. Appendix A is the approved level of service that we've been working under in Public Works since amalgamation. The paper bags overrode this, but this is the basis, and the reason we included this in the report, it shows you the level of service in every community. But yes, you are correct. The bylaw that changed clear bags in this level of service was changed to paper bags.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the confusion.
Councillor McDonald, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I think Ridgetown and Thamesville residents will be glad to know that their levels of service will remain the same. But my question's about the backyard composter program. So it's good to know that the program will be advertised and communicated to residents, but do you have a sense of approximately the percentage of residents in other communities that have a program like this that are using the backyard composters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. I'll defer to Huda if she knows a number from some of our comparators about uptake of the program. But I will say, through all of these, even a green bin program or leaf and yard waste, a lot of it is about public engagement and communication to make sure people understand these services that we're offering and also how best to use them. So included in all our figures and costs includes staff time and money to do public education through multiple different sources, because that is, having community uptake is based on that. But I will ask Huda if she knows of any rates.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We don't have any numbers. We can ask for these numbers. However, I can say that the usage or the uptake of programs for backyard composters really depend on the culture in the community, the programs that they have, whether they have, for example, robust leaf and yard pickup, or they have a green bin program already, then that's probably not going to be widely used as some of the other communities where they have a stringent requirements for the composting without having green bin or other solutions at the curb.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Story, followed by Councillor McGrail.
Ryan and team, great job. This was clearly a huge amount of work with a lot of moving parts, so appreciate your continued work on this. And for the questions that I've already sent you and you're very patient answering, I did have another question. Why aren't we tendering this out? I know we tender out our other waste collection. Why wouldn't we do the same here? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. So you are correct. We do contract out the actual garbage collection in Chatham-Kent. However, the leaf and yard waste program has been done internally through Public Works operations. So several, like I said, one staff member completely is funded, but also through the use of Public Works equipment. And that was a very convenient match. Given the level of service in a few communities, we could make it work. This program is going to be much more robust and is going to need a dedicated crew. I think that's, I think there's lots of different services on the table. This council has talked about, should you contract it? Should you bring it in-house? We have seen significant, in the last tendering process of the garbage contract, significant increases to that pricing. And our review for stability of pricing was to propose this service as in-house collection. We think there's a few benefits to that, to understanding the operations. When we're doing a jurisdictional review, many large municipalities do contract waste services, but also do some in-house to offer some competitiveness in the process. So our recommendation before you is to run this program internally, which we have the numbers before you. We don't know what a cost to contract this service would be, and so I can't offer you a comparative price, but at this time, we're recommending it to be an in-house program.
So we don't know if we can get this service at a lesser price right now if we tendered it out. I look at these numbers and they're certainly substantial. I look at where my concern lays a lot now too is with the purchasing of the trucks, for example. I assume those are trucks that we'll need to source from the US potentially. And with the tariffs, I see that that could be a substantial cost that we have not budgeted for. So I do see, I respect the position on we don't know the cost necessarily of tendering with an outside contractor, but we may be on the hook for substantial costs internally if we don't tender it out. So I do admit I'm a little torn on this one because I feel like it might be worth tendering it out to see what the numbers are that come in because of the just such uncertainty with certain purchases through the tariff economic climate we find ourselves in. If we're tendering it out, that cost goes on the contractor potentially versus us. So that's where I'm struggling a little bit, why we wouldn't consider that as an option. And with tenders, if I understand correctly, if those numbers come in that are not reasonable to us, we could still bring it in-house, could we not?
Edward, you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to pick up a little bit on where Ryan was speaking to earlier. Historically, we've had one bidder on our waste contract. I know that on the last time that we went out for our waste collection, we had one bid, and the cost went up substantially. I know that through the recycling that the province took on, they also only received one bid. So the environment here doesn't really lend itself to much competition. And if we go out and tender this, we'll most likely pay at an elevated cost. In terms of moving forward with this, we wouldn't be hiring any staff until we had the equipment in place. And we will go out to tender for that equipment. And if it comes back at an elevated cost, that's a point that council can maybe then decide, is this still on target to achieve the kind of costs that we've identified here. So there is still, I would say, an off-ramp in terms of this, but going out to tender solely does expose us to receiving only one bid in this community, which we've seen in the past.
And if I could just add, no, that's okay. I would just add to your question about the garbage trucks and where they're manufactured. So there are several suppliers of collection trucks. Most of the chassis do come out of the United States, but then the bodies are built here in Canada. So there is a risk. But I will say the reason for the timelines in the report is that even if we ordered these vehicles today, the delivery may be a year and a half or 2 years. Unknown at this time how any tariffs would apply. And also, our contractors would most likely, if we were to tender, would have to purchase new trucks as well, and they'd be exposed to similar risks of any tariffs at that time.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly uncertain all around. My last question, thanks for those answers. So there's no opportunity for our current waste collections contractor to take this on for us, or is this a totally separate service that they do not provide? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. This service is not, in any way, shape, or form in the tender that we put out for our garbage collection. If you tendered this, would that bidder bid on something like this? Maybe. I can't speak for them, but there's no, say, on-ramp to our existing contract to add these services.
Councillor McGrail, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
A 2-second review on how we conduct our waste audits. Is it through just scales, or how do we do that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. To be brief, the waste audits that I was speaking of that were contracted out picked randomized streets in the community. Like I said, we're doing them 4 times a year. They actually go out and grab the garbage from someone's toter and take it back to the shop and open it up and count, what is garbage, what is organics, what is plant-based materials. That's how those audits are done. And they're randomized, so in different communities, different streets, and then we're giving you the sum of that data on average, what we find. When we talk about the transfer stations, as we mentioned, in Wallaceburg, we do have scales, so we have some actual data. But in our other transfer stations, we had to do a lot of work with the operators at the facilities and our public works operators to make estimates, and also based on grinding. So if we collect a bunch of brush, we estimated the size of those piles, but also through our contractors who grind it know how much time and how much material that was. So a lot of it is estimate based, and we're trying to provide you the averages.
Going forward, a more efficient but way to really give us a good average, because maybe through the estimate, we're higher than we think.
Thank you, Councillor. This is exactly what we're proposing. What we have is the best estimates we can provide you with the data we have. After we implement this program, through the addition of scales, and through the collection, we would be able to refine exactly what we have picked up. It would all be coming back to one source so that we could come back to council and present, hey, we told you it was 51%. We're actually at 53 or we're actually at 45. That's the kind of information that time is going to have to tell us, but also shows Chatham-Kent's commitment to meeting the 50% target, that we are doing something about it. We're getting better data over time, and we will share that and act accordingly in the future if we are lower or higher than the 50%.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Ryan, just currently what's going on within the municipality, we have many communities that do not have leaf and yard pickup. So people in the urban communities, are they allowed to go out to the dump at this point of time and take their waste at no charge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. So leaf and yard waste has outlets at every resident of Chatham-Kent has access to a leaf and yard depot. So for instance, in Chatham, we have the Leaf and Yard Depot over on Creek Road. And so curbside residents can bring their stuff to their designated leaf and yard waste facility, not garbage, but
Yeah.
leaf and yard
Yeah.
waste.
Okay, so like I'm just curious because it sounds like we're implementing a plan simply to meet a provincial requirement to have a certain number that is hitting the waste. So I'm wondering why maybe we're not monitoring it better at our existing drop-offs right now, because I haven't really heard any complaints about yard waste or your leaves being dumped elsewhere. Like, I haven't heard any complaints or any problems of people trying to get rid of it. So I'm thinking, like, we're implementing, this is what's going on in my head, and it's probably totally wrong, that we are gonna pick all this stuff up now so we can weigh it, so we can measure it, so we can prove to the province that we're collecting a certain amount. Well, the process is already happening, so now we're talking about implementing a service, prorating it, which is gonna increase the taxes. And when we already have majority of our municipality in a habit of already taking it to a dump site. So maybe I'm thinking this wrong or reading it wrong. I'd be happy to be corrected, but that's what's going on in my head right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps I could answer your question. It involves multiple factors. So yes, there are definitely a subset of our community that is used to using the depots. Some of the depot locations are more convenient than others. For example, Chatham is just at the end of town. Walsburg is, again, at the edge of town, whereas if you're in a different area, you might have to travel 10 minutes or whatever that might be. So there's that. We also know that our carts are huge, whereas that they are just enough for some families. They are more than enough for a lot of our households. And so our data just backed up that a lot of it is filled up with organic waste that shouldn't be landfilled. And back to the question about why we're doing this. We're doing this for multiple factors, not just because we want to meet the provincial policy statement target, which is definitely something that we're kind of legally obliged to do. But the other thing is also we are one of the very, very few communities in Ontario that do not provide curbside pickup of leaf and yard. I mean, we do in some of the smaller areas in Chatham-Kent, but it's not everywhere. And then back to Councillor Sakachi's point, we're very lucky in Chatham-Kent that we have a partnership with the local landfill, that we are guaranteed space for our municipal waste, and that the Urge landfill probably has one of the highest capacities now in Ontario. But we should never take that for granted, because with the pressures that everybody's feeling in Ontario, especially the larger municipalities, and everybody's looking at space for landfills, just because we're in good shape now doesn't mean that we will be in 10 to 15 years. So we should be doing what we are doing in terms of the best we can do to divert waste. And in doing that, we are meeting a target that is set by the province. So I hope that helps.
But in other words, if the people that are not taking it to a landfill, they're putting it in their blue box, so we're measuring those wastes, do we have to have a certain percentage of a certain kind of waste? Or, I know it's probably not right for them to put it in there, but to me, you're not going to get any additional waste by providing a pickup service. It's just going to be not in this box, it's just going to be in this bag.
Right, but it's going to be out of the landfill. So instead of it being true, that instead of I have, say, 10 kilograms of waste, I'll put all of it in my cart. Maybe 2 kilograms of it is leaf and yard waste. Now I have the service, so I'm going to put it in bags, and the municipality is going to come and pick it separately. But at least that 2 kilograms is not going to the landfill. So thereby, we're diverting that. It's going to be grounded and composted, right? It's used as a resource recovery, which is the whole point of the policy. The provincial policy is to recover the resources within the organic waste. And we're also saving space in the landfill. And if we're doing this correct, and hopefully the 2 kilogram space in my cart is not filled with other garbage, we might be saving money on our contractual collection and disposal costs of that at the landfill.
Okay, I think I understand it now. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi, you had an additional add to the motion.
Yeah, it's already on the floor, Mayor Caniff, number 7.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'll be okay.
If I have since I moved it, if I have the final,
Yes, you got final say.
Just a quick comment to you. I think that it's very creative what you did, but just to summarize though, if we didn't do it this way, the second option to meet, like, not the second, but other options to meet this threshold would be far more expensive, right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. So as presented in that chart, the next option is a green bin collection program, which many municipalities are starting to go to, not only to meet the target, but because residents are asking for this service in their communities, especially in large urban centers. But the answer is it's very expensive. Imagine what we're proposing tonight versus green bin program. Same collection trucks, same kind of staff that would have to pick it up, but then you got to take the organic waste to a digester, for example. We do not have one currently in our community. We'd have to truck that out and pay per tonnage rate to dispose of that organic material, as opposed to leaf and yard waste, which we grind into mulch and then offer to residents and to take for free. So that's the one main benefit of this program, to try it first, is that the disposal of this stuff is low cost or no cost versus organics, which has a substantial cost to get rid of.
Yeah, thanks. And a lot of places, unless they have a digester, don't want to take it because the smell as well, right? I guess this is just the kind of the best of the options. I wish we didn't have to support this. I'm not supportive of spending another $4 million on something. I don't care if it's coming from capital or, an area-rated services. I just think it's really unfortunate that we keep getting legislation that we have to do with no addition. And people wonder why our taxes go up every single year. They say it's a reflection of bad decisions made around this table. We're making a 2% decision because we have to. And that's just, to me, is really unfortunate. Thanks.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Finn? Councillor McGrail?
Yes.
Councillor Story?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0. And the next 18C, motion by Councillor Bondy regarding Chatham-Kent Community Hub cost. I have pulled that one. I have discussed with Councillor Bondy. It is a duplicate request from a motion that Council already passed in October of 2024, asking for a financials, and that will be coming back on May 12th. And if there are any further questions, they could be asked on the floor at that time. Okay.
Item 19, Finance, Budget, Information, Technology, and Transformation.
19A, the 2024 BMA Municipal Study, and we have a presentation by administration.
Good evening. My name is Brock Priddle. I'm the Manager of Corporate Accounting. Tonight's presentation will highlight the results of the 2024 BMA Municipal Study, which had 126 Ontario municipalities participate. Chatham-Kent takes part in the BMA Municipal Study annually, which provides us an opportunity to benchmark ourselves against other municipalities. In this presentation, we draw a comparison between Chatham-Kent and these 7 other municipalities, which were selected based on geographic and socioeconomic factors. The following slides will show how Chatham-Kent compares to our 7 chosen competitors, which is represented as the group average, and to all 126 municipalities who participated in the study, represented as the survey average. The BMA study focuses primarily on 3 areas: socioeconomic, financial, and cost of service and affordability indicators. The socioeconomic area captures items such as population change, population density, and taxes as a percentage of income. The financial area captures items such as tax revenue, tax expenditures per capita, debt, and reserves. The cost of service and affordability indicators compares Chatham-Kent's cost of services and taxation to other municipalities who who participated in this study. One of the unique challenges faced by Chatham-Kent is its population density. Population density represents the number of individuals per square kilometer. As you can see on the table, Chatham-Kent has a low population density, meaning there are fewer people to pay for the required infrastructure and services such as roads, bridges, water, wastewater, etc., over a large geographic area. Chatham-Kent has a population density of 45 people per square kilometer, whereas London has 1,153, Sarnia has 461, Windsor has 1,760. This slide represents the shift in tax burden between tax classes since 2011. The share of the levy paid by farm class has nearly doubled, largely as a result of the increased farm values compared to other tax classes over the 2012 and 2016 assessment cycles. Residential has held steady, while multi-residential, commercial, and industrial classes have seen decreases in their share of the levy. One of the factors driving these decreases are owner-initiated appeals before the Assessment Review Board, especially in the commercial class. Corporations with significant financial resources are hiring experts to appeal property assessments across the province. When they are successful in their appeals, the burden is shifted to other property owners. Chatham-Kent is actively working to protect our assessment base by engaging our own experts to find anomalies in the assessment roll and represent Chatham-Kent's interests before the ARB. As a result of these efforts, over the course of 2024, we were able to achieve a net increase in our municipal taxes of just over $100,000 that would have otherwise been lost revenue. Property taxes are still based on values as of January 1st, 2016, due to the delayed reassessment cycle. On August 16th, 2023, the Ontario government filed a regulation to amend the Assessment Act, extending the postponement of the province-wide reassessment through the end of what would have been the 2021 to 2024 assessment cycle. We continue to wait on the province for more information on this matter as they complete a review of the property assessment and taxation system in Ontario. In 2024, Chatham-Kent had the 12th lowest assessment per capita of the 126 municipalities who participated in the BMA study, with roughly $106,000 of assessment per capita. Assessment per capita takes Chatham-Kent's total weighted assessment divided by our population. In the group of 7 comparator municipalities, Chatham-Kent is second lowest, ahead of Windsor. Household income is a measure which indicates a community's ability to pay for the services provided by the municipality. Chatham-Kent is on the low end of municipalities who participated in the study and is below both the survey and group average, with an average household income of approximately $91,000. The financial position of a municipality is a key indicator of its health and is determined by taking the financial assets of a municipality less its liabilities. Chatham-Kent has a positive financial position of $2,798 per capita, significantly above the survey average of $847 and higher than the group average of $1,713. Prior to 2014, Chatham-Kent had a negative financial position, meaning that our liabilities exceeded our financial assets. Beginning in 2014, Chatham-Kent moved to a positive financial position of $241 per capita, which has continued to increase, reaching $2,798 per capita in 2023. The asset consumption ratio of a municipality is an indicator of the age of its assets. The older the average age of its assets, the greater the ratio. The tax consumption ratio are those assets that are funded through property tax dollars, while the water and wastewater assets are funded through PUC rates. Chatham-Kent's asset consumption ratio is higher than both the survey and group average. A ratio of 25% or lower is considered new. 26 to 50% is considered moderately new. 51 to 75%, which is the range that we're in, is considered moderately old, and anything over 75% would be considered old. The level of reserves required by a municipality will vary for several reasons, including the services that are provided, the age and condition of the infrastructure, service levels that are desired by the population, and economic conditions and projections, to name a few. Reserve comparative analysis measures a municipality's reserves as a percentage of its own source revenue. Chatham-Kent's reserve balances funded through taxes are 110% of our own source revenue, which is higher than both the group and the survey average. Chatham-Kent's water and wastewater reserves are below both the group and survey average. Water reserves have increased since 2021 from 18% to 22%, and wastewater reserves have increased since 2021 from 35% to 46%. Chatham-Kent continues to make significant progress in lowering its debt. Chatham-Kent's overall outstanding debt and tax debt are both below the group and survey average. Approximately 60% of Chatham-Kent's debt is related to water and wastewater, which is funded by user fees administered by the PUC and not by property taxes. A large portion of tax debt is funded by senior levels of government. The actual amount of debt funded directly by Chatham-Kent's property taxes is approximately $60 per capita. Many municipalities aim to have a debt-to-reserve ratio of 1, as this is deemed financially prudent by rating agencies. A ratio of one denotes that for every dollar of debt, there's a dollar in reserves. Chatham-Kent's debt-to-reserve ratio is 0.1, meaning for every 10 cents of debt, we have a dollar in reserves. This debt-to-reserve ratio is healthier than the group average, which is 0.7, as well as the survey average, which is 0.3. Taxes receivable are taxes that have been billed and are owing by residents and businesses in Chatham-Kent but have not yet been paid. Taxes receivable are a sign of a municipality's health and its residents' ability to pay their tax bill. Taxes receivable in Chatham-Kent increased since 2022 from 3.4% to 5.9% in 2023. Comparing Chatham-Kent's water and wastewater costs for residential households, we are below the survey average and above the group average. It's important to consider that we have a significant amount of infrastructure which is spread over a wide geographic area. In comparison, Windsor has 3 water and wastewater plants. Chatham-Kent has a total of 14. Water and wastewater comparison for industrial water costs shows that Chatham-Kent is below both the group and survey average, with only Sarnia having lower industrial water and wastewater costs within the group. Comparing single-family detached homes, the taxes paid in Chatham-Kent are below both the survey and group average for a similar house in other municipalities. For example, if you purchase a house in Chatham-Kent, that house may cost you $450,000. But if you were to go to London and purchase that exact same house, it may cost you $650,000. So while you hear that London's tax rate is lower, you're paying slightly less in taxes in Chatham-Kent than you would in London for the same house. This slide is the same measure, but reaches outside of our comparator group to demonstrate the tax burden of an average detached bungalow in each participating municipality with a population over 100,000. Chatham-Kent has the lowest tax burden of participating municipalities with $3,533. This is 24% lower than the average of this group and 49% lower than the highest in this group. The inventory of high-rise multi-residential has grown significantly in recent years under the CIP program. In 2024, Chatham-Kent did not have a significant number of occupied multi-residential high-rises. However, the taxes paid per unit in Chatham-Kent are above the survey and group average within this class. When comparing the tax burden on a commercial building, Chatham-Kent is higher than the survey average and the group average for taxes paid per square foot. As noted in this slide, Chatham-Kent's industrial taxes per square foot is substantially lower than both the group and survey average. When comparing both taxes and water and wastewater costs, Chatham-Kent is below both the group and survey average, and Chatham-Kent has the 21st lowest cost of service of all of the 126 municipalities that were in this survey. With Chatham-Kent having one of the lowest income per household ratings in the study, The property taxes and water costs as a percentage of income is above both the group and survey average, even though, as noted in the previous slide, Chatham-Kent has one of the lowest cost of services in the survey. And with that, I take any questions.
I don't see any questions. All sorts, there's a lot of information in those slides.
Yes.
I think, to summarize, it looks pretty consistent with last year. There's no significant anomalies that popped up from prior years. So thanks for winding that. How many pages is that report? 29. No, sorry, the what? Yeah. Yeah. So you took 600 pages and condensed it to those slides. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Item 20, Chief Administrative Office.
20A, 2025 and 2026 municipal insurance renewal.
Councillor Doyle and Councillor Hall, can I get you put on the floor, please?
Happy to move that, Mayor.
So seconded. Councillor Doyle, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick one, and just, I should have brought it up quick. So going by memory, I think it said that we expected a 15% increase, and it only turned into a 9% increase. So I was just gonna ask the difference, the 6% difference there, are we able to use that to buy down our taxes next year?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave Taylor, Director of Legal Services. Certainly, I'll defer to Gord Quinton if he has any additions to my answer. I'll try to give you the answer, but recognizing I'm not an accountant, hopefully I get it right. So for the 4-year budgeting process, we try to project out what we think we're going to see, and obviously on insurance, that's a difficult thing to do. So what we would intend to do in this situation where we've actually seen a reduction for this year, as for the 2025 year, it would just be dealt with as a variance, because of course we've already planned for that budget. But for the 2026 budget year, administration, myself will work to actually reduce our estimate based on the best information we have. And so functionally, you will actually see a positive impact to what was projected to be in the budget. But I'll quickly look over to see if I check with Gord. I got it right. Perfect. Thank you.
Got the 2 thumbs up on that answer.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Story has logged off of the call, so Councillor Finn
Yes.
and Councillor McGrail.
Yes.
Whoops. 1 second. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Okay, we have 3 notices of motion. Councillor McGrail, then Councillor Doyle, then Councillor Sakachi. Councillor McGrail, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Canna. I, Councillor Jamie McGrail, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the April 7th, 2025 council meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas enhanced customer service and investing in community safety and well-being is a council term priority, and whereas a community can cope and prepare better when facts are presented during a boil water advisory. And whereas municipality transparency is key to overcoming emergency situations for residents, and understanding the emergency timeframe helps residents deal and comply with advisory. Therefore, I am requesting that a fact sheet be available for residents to refer to in a boil advisory situation outline. This includes steps the municipality need to comply with, time required to accomplish said steps, and any precautions with these steps. Therefore, all municipal communications communicate basic timeline when a boil advisory is called, and therefore updates are communicated to public if they veer from basic timeline, including all factors that may push back basic protocol timelines, and therefore follow up with instructions to residents on what to do after the boil water advisory has ended. Thank you.
Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I, Councillor Doyle, will bring forward the following motion for discussion and voting at the April 7th, 2025 council meeting. Whereas we are currently in trade negotiations with the United States, whereas we have a new Prime Minister who was not elected by Canadians at large, but rather by the Liberal Party only, Whereas the majority of Canadians would like an election to be called, whereas it would be better to have a newly elected leader in place to negotiate with President Trump, therefore be it resolved that administration send a letter to the federal government on behalf of council no later than April 11th, asking for them to call a federal election as soon as possible. Furthermore, administration send a copy of the letter and the motion to all other municipalities in Ontario, our MPP, MP, AMO, FCM, Roma, and ask them to make the same motion and send similar letters. Furthermore, administration put a copy of the letter in our next information package.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you. I, Councillor Anthony Sakachi, here provide notice that I'll be bringing the following motion for voting and discussion at April 28th meeting of Council. Whereas in 2022, Council approved a community support agreement with Hydro One, whereby Hydro One provides funding to the municipality of Chatham-Kent as host of Hydro One transmission projects. And whereas a community benefit contribution of $1 million annually for 10 years from Hydro One is to solely be used for capital projects for recreation purposes as well as art and culture purposes in Chatham-Kent. And whereas currently the council ward funding program allocates $25,000 annual to each ward councillor and $125,000 to the mayor for applications to priority projects within the respective wards or in case of the mayors throughout Chatham-Kent. And whereas requests are compiled and shared with your councillor and the mayor, and whereas the councillors and the mayor review the requests and advise whether the request should be proceed to internal review, and whereas municipal staff review the request and provide feedback to councillors and mayor who ultimately determine the request should be funded and in what amount. And whereas these requests often have ongoing life cycle operational costs paid for by increasing property taxes and not the community benefit fund. And whereas master plans serve as a roadmap for sustainable growth and development, ensuring resources are utilized efficiently in alignment with community values by engaging in stakeholders and gathering input from diverse forces, and whereas master plans foster a sense of ownership and collaboration with the community and not only guide decision-making, but inspire innovation and creativity in addressing evolving needs and challenges identified in our instrumental in shaping vibrant, inclusive communities in organized and a cohesive manner. Be it resolved that administration develop a more strategic plan for the equal distribution of funds throughout our communities, aligned with current and future arts and cultural master plans and the 2025 recreational master plan in process, and a report back to council prior to the 2026 budget update in the fall. In this report, if administration recommends changes to the council award funding program, they should consider an effective date and end date of this term of council as not to impact current council commitments. And B, administration report back annually on the status of Hydro One funds spent and date and commitments to spend future funds.
Thank you. Closed session reports. Councillor Hall and Councillor Juvenile, can I second them?
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. Closed session report from Monday, March 17th, 2025. Council received information on litigation and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege regarding Jubenville versus Chatham-Kent, Section 239, 2E and F of the Municipal Act, and I so move.
I so am I allowed to do this if I wasn't there? Okay, I so second.
Any questions?
Councillor McGrail. Councillor Finn.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Finn. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Communication items. Councillor Doyle, you had a 4B and 4F you wanted to pull out?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We'll start with 4B. The resolution of the City of Brantford dated February 20, 2025 regarding driver training and exemptions, Auditor General Report. So for that one, I just agree with them. I was actually working on something similar a little while ago. So I would like to, and Judy, if I screw this up, let me know. I would like to pass a motion of support for that one, and then to distribute the same, distribute our support to the same distribution list that they used. Did I get that right? Okay.
Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Juvenile. Councillor Doyle, any other words? Okay, anyone opposed to doing that? Seeing none, that motion carries. And 4F.
Okay, the second one, so 4F. So that's a resolution from the City of Sarnia dated March 6, 2025 regarding the carbon tax. So for that one, I would like to do the exact same thing. Pass a motion of support and distribute that to the same distribution list that they used.
Any seconder for that? Councillor Jubenville? Anyone opposed to that? Councillor B. McGregor? Okay, so we have some opposition to it, so I guess we will have some discussion and vote on it then.
Yeah, just recognizing that we've had recent announcements from the federal government around carbon tax, and there's likely an election on the way. I don't know if our role is to step in the political fray on this type of issue.
Councillor Harrigan, you had a comment?
I was raising my hand in opposition, just similar comments to Councillor B. McGregor.
Okay then, any other comments before we put it to vote? Are we going to do electronic vote on this one?
No, we show hands.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, can you lead the charge on that one?
Okay, so she has a question, Councillor Jubenville.
Councillor Jubenville?
I just want to confirm that, that there is information out in the public that our Prime Minister has stepped back or paused the carbon tax, but it hasn't passed through legislation. So just to confirm that everybody knows that. It's just something that he's commented on, that he's going to do it, but it hasn't officially passed that he's repealed the carbon tax. So I just want to confirm that everybody knows that fact before we vote. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Doyle, any last thoughts on this?
Just currently, especially with everything going on right now, we can't afford to keep taking money out of our constituents' pockets. So this is one more way to keep money in their pockets. So I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, with that, Madam Clerk? Okay, do you
can just do electronic voting.
We're doing electronic voting, okay.
Councillor Finn?
No.
And Councillor McGrail?
No.
Waiting. Councillor Story's not here. Councillor Wright? All votes are in and motion fails 5-12.
Okay, Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Anderson, can I get you to move the rest of the communication items, please?
So moved.
So seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Non-agenda business.
Thank you, and through you. I just have a quick question to Mr. Solda. If you could give an update on the Talbot Trail closure and when we can expect that work to commence, please.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. As council is aware, we're undertaking the detailed design for that road realignment. The EA was approved last year. That includes the development of technical drawings, and we're also undertaking some site investigations related to the environmental permitting side right now. Some of those activities are going to be continuing through the spring, including the archaeological investigations and environmental screenings. We've been working with the property owners on property acquisition and expect this to come to council this spring. We're also targeting to have the construction procurement issued in the summer, and then subsequent to that, the construction is going to start. We are hoping to make good progress in construction this year. However, given the date that we'll be going out, most likely the actual reopening of that roadway won't happen until spring of 26. We do recognize, the need to have public information out there. So we are working with our communications staff to establish a website that will keep the public informed both on the detailed design, the tender, and the construction as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Solda. I definitely appreciate that. I've been sending people actually to the website. We do have the construction, the interactive construction project map, and it hasn't been updated since April of 2020. So I know residents are definitely looking forward to that getting updated so that they can get up-to-date information. Thank you.
Councillor Crew?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. In recognition of Senior Month in June, Chatham-Kent Council is seeking nominations for the 2025 Chatham-Kent Senior Achievement Awards. To qualify, your nominee must be a resident of Chatham-Kent, age 60 plus, have achieved significant goals and outstanding contribution as a volunteer in the community. Submit your nominee by April 13th on the Let's Talk Chatham-Kent, and it's under the Chatham-Kent Senior Achievement Awards 2025. So we'll be accepting those nominations until April 13th.
Okay, we'll move to first and second reading. Councillor Thompson and Sakachi, can I get you to move that, please?
Moved. Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Third and final reading. Councillor Harrigan and McDonald.
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
And seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. We'll move to resolution of council. Councillor Hall and Councillor B. McGregor, can I get you to wrap it up?
I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, April 7th, 2025, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
So seconded.
Anyone opposed? Wrapping up 8:32. Done. Thank you, everyone.